her and eat a little something with her, and pretty soon Mrs. Miller started gaining a little weight. And the relationship between Mrs. Miller and Mr. Miller started to have problems because they never were spending time talking anymore, because whenever they wanted to talk, Sister Gabby was there talking. And the children's grades, even though she was helping them with homework, they began to find that there was a whole lot of stories and very little homework that was happening. And the kids' grades started to go down. And as time go by, they noticed that their budget began to get bigger and bigger because they were buying all these products. They needed a bigger car now, because before, where they had a 5-seater, Sister Gabby wanted to go places with them because she had arthritis, she couldn't drive, and they started taking her around with them. And little by little, their whole lives began to transform by this person that had been introduced in their house. And kids' grades started to go downhill. They were walking around in a trance half the time, thinking about the wild stories that they'd heard. Mr. and Mrs. Miller were not talking much. Mr. Miller used to read, but when he'd come home, Sister Gabby said, "You don't need to read the paper anymore. I got all the news. Let me tell you what's going on. I'll sort it out and give you the headlines right now." And she would make them much more interesting than the paper. And she would actually expand on the news a little bit, mixing it in with her opinion and commentary. Brilliant, brilliant person. So colorful and interesting to listen to. But after a while, things were not going very well in the Miller house. The kids all began to fight among themselves because Sister Gabby would be telling one a story, and they'd tug on her sleeve and say, "You've been talking long enough to Beth." Billy said, "Talk to me. Tell me again about the war stories." And little Tammy said, "No, it's my turn. Talk to me." And pretty soon the kids were all fighting among themselves. Sister Gabby seemed to enjoy it, that they were all fighting over her attention. And after a couple of years, they couldn't make their mortgage payment. Mr. Miller wasn't getting enough sleep. He wasn't performing as well at work. And so he was demoted and wasn't able to keep up on his sales. So they started having financial problems. And they started having problems with each other. And the kids started having problems with their grades and problems with their relationships with each other and problems with their relationships at school. And they weren't getting as much exercise because they started neglecting practice and the family outings. Couldn't go as many places because as soon as they wanted to load up, Sister Gabby would be there, and she was so nice, they just couldn't tell her no. She knew how to manipulate them, make them all feel guilty for not taking her along. And it seemed like she had them under some sort of a spell. And the whole family was transformed when they invited her in as a renter. That it just really messed up the family. So, would you like to invite Sister Gabby to come and move in at your house? But she's very entertaining and has a lot of information, a lot of experience to share. Now, how many of you have realized that this is an allegory somewhere along the way? Sister Gabby T. Seymour, whole name is Sister Gabby T.V. Seymour. Gabby Seymour, get it? Represents something that has come into, a renter that has come into many American homes, 98% of American homes, and that's probably true even of Christian homes, that has brought in all kinds of problems along with it, namely television. I just use this silly analogy to try to make very real for you what's happened when people have invited television into their homes. Do you know what it really does? Now, just so you understand, I am not going to say that everybody should throw out their TVs. But if the Holy Spirit tells you that, you should listen. Just about everything on TV is bad except Amazing Facts. No, So I want to just, issue a disclaimer right here. How do you describe hypnosis? There's a definition. A lot of people are under a spell. Hypnosis is described as a trance-like condition that can be artificially induced, characterized by an altered consciousness, diminished willpower, and an increased responsiveness to suggestion. Now, if you're wondering if anyone in your home is hypnotized, look at your children next time they're watching television. You know how hypnosis works? It appeals to the optic nerves, the eyes, and the auditory nerves, the ears. Everybody point to your cheek. That's your chin. Just checking. So, through lights and through sound, your body responds to rhythms. And your body responds to light. And it is very easy to hypnotize a person if you've got some, you've ever seen the old, magician who's swinging the flashing jewel or the light, saying, "Look closely." And with their mesmerizing voice and the flashing, glittering object or the orb, they're put into a trance-like state. Well, it's even easier if you've got some kind of syncopated light and rhythm. A person can be put in kind of the lower brain levels, a hypnotic state, and then suggestions are made that the subconscious mind understands that the conscious mind is not really processing, and people find themselves buying things they normally didn't know they need. But it really does have an effect. Television is the ideal medium to hypnotize. And that's why you've got to be very careful. How many of you would invite a hypnosis into your house? But don't you think that if you've got companies on Madison Avenue that are literally spending not millions, billions of dollars every year developing commercials for the sole purpose of manipulating the masses to purchase products that may or may not be good for you? It's all really about money. And most TV, with a few rare exceptions, exists for the reason of making money. The sponsors pay the stations. The stations produce a program, a broad variety of programs, to get people to watch the channel to buy the sponsors' products. They used to call them soap operas because they'd have these daytime dramas in the middle of the day, and typically housewives would get caught up in the emotional romance and intrigue of these soap operas, and then they'd advertise soap, because it was typically the mothers that they were targeting with their advertising to buy their soap, their detergent, whatever it happened to be, their dish soap, and they called them soap operas because it was always sponsored by the soap companies because they knew the mothers were home during that day doing the laundry, washing the dishes, buying soap. And it was all driven by money. Principle hasn't changed. There are a few exceptions where people will subscribe to a channel that does nothing but show golf, which to me is like boredom on steroids. But there are people, that's what they do, just watch golf all day long. I know I've got friends that are really angry that I would say that. But so there's a few channels that are restricted for things, but most channels, they exist because they're selling advertising. And a lot of money goes in to try to capture the attention of the people. Most people now also can freeze their programs. They can go buy their commercials. They can fast forward through their commercials. And so the people who are sponsoring television time, they are absolutely desperate to get your attention to sell the product. And they have to go to the most extraordinary means. You know how much money is spent on a commercial during the Super Bowl? Sometimes for 30 seconds, they'll spend $50 million for a 30-second commercial. And how much attention would you put into developing that commercial if you had 30 seconds to talk to 50 million people? You got to capture their attention. And they will use outrageous things, immoral things. They'll do anything to just get the shock effect to get people's attention so that you'll buy the beer or whatever it is they're trying to sell. But that's not just happening during the Super Bowl. It's happening all day long. And when kids are watching their programming, the merchandisers are trying to sell the children, saying, you need these toys, you need these clothes, you need this food or cereal or whatever it happens to be. And then the kids go to the store and they're screaming bloody murder, pulling on the shopping cart, saying, Mom, I've got to have this box of cereal because they told me on TV I'll never reach real happiness unless I eat this cereal. And so, and you've probably all seen that mother trying to drag her child away from that box that has the goofy cartoons on the cover. It's 100% sugar. And the kid thinks, I've got to have it or I won't be happy. Do you know that a child, by the time it enters school, has spent more time in front of a television set than they will ever spend in college classroom. So what is defining who they are and who they'll become? Now, there's a lot of very dangerous effects connected with television. There's the social effects. The average American watches television, average American, between 3 or 4 hours daily. What does all this watching replace that used to happen in families? What did families look like before television? Some of us, we've got a whole generation now that just doesn't even know. I mean, I grew up when at least there were black and white televisions, but we didn't have them in every room. I didn't have a TV in my room growing up. But now it becomes very common for the kids to have TVs in their room, and hours are spent every day watching television that used to be spent in social interaction, in figuring out how to resolve different problems, in getting physical activity, in using your mind to solve problems, and it's just not being done. Right now, people sit down and they watch television and it just pours into their brain, and they're not processing these things anymore. The most important activity replaced by television is the interaction of family and friends. Very few neighbors know each other anymore, where they used to go up and down the street and interact and socialize and visit and help each other solve problems and support one another and love each other and witness to each other. We can't be bothered because we're watching TV, and it doesn't matter if we went and knocked on our neighbor's door, they wouldn't want to be bothered because they're watching TV. And Karen and I walk around our neighborhood at night, and a lot of the homes you go by after dark, you see that mesmerizing bluish glow flickering through the windows, and everybody's got Sister Gabby on, right? Does this have an effect on Christians? Television can slowly control our lives and cast out the natural family experience of daily conversation and personal sharing. As a diversion, it deprives parents and children of meaningful relationships. It offers easy ways out of family conflict by eliminating opportunities for family members to get to know each other better. Friends and relatives visit less often, or if they do, there might be little communication as when they come over, they let Sister Gabby out of her room. Everyone sits and watches. Now, Karen used to say to me when we first began to date, she said, I don't know why people would go out to watch a movie for a date, because that'd be the environment where you really don't spend any time talking together. It's just letting something else pour into your mind. The television set indeed hypnotizes and silences everybody in a room when it's on. If Sister Gabby's in the house, there's a social vacuum that is created. The home becomes a place of artificial residence. People come and go like ghosts that are under a spell, and they never interact. And how many of you know houses where the television set is on and no one's even watching? Gabby talks all the time, whether anyone's paying attention or not. Sometimes subconsciously in the background, people are hearing things. Sometimes people keep the television on because they say, I don't like the quiet. I feel like I'm alone, and I can understand that. Put on a tape. Listen to music. There must be good things, but and it's not even, if you find a good channel, I like to watch the news, but boy, the advertisers in between and the commercials. When I grew up, I remember actually being shocked because the commercials were pretty tame compared to today when I was a kid. But I remember being shocked one time. Playtex was advertising the new Cross Your Heart bra on television. And I was sitting there on the couch with my mother and my brother, and we had one of those remote controls that when you press the button, it made a loud clicking noise because it didn't use infrared. It was a big magnifying screen, pop, and then it would change the channel every time you press it. Any of you remember what I'm talking about? It was a big clicker thing on primitive. And I remember my mom clicked the channel, it